Welcome to Nale Yoga. I'm Ruthie Eisenberg, and today I'm so excited for a conversation with a very special guest, someone whose life and work are a living embodiment of mystical integration and transformational healing. We have the privilege today of speaking with Rav Benji Elson, a psychotherapist, educator, musician, and facilitator of embodied Jewish practice. He's the author of the widely acclaimed book Dance of the Omer, which is accompanied by a groundbreaking course that weaves together Kabbalah, Jewish psychology, therapeutic modalities, and nature connection into a powerful journey of self discovery and self refinement. And his book and course actually happened to be the inspiration for the upcoming series of Yoga Nidra meditations on this podcast, which you'll hear more about later. Rav Benji has taught and facilitated all over the world, from Israel to India, Zambia to Mexico, and he has this amazing ability to bring down mystical teachings and make them feel personal, practical, and alive. He brings together a deep well of Kabbalistic wisdom, nature based spirituality, and cutting edge therapeutic tools in a way that feels both grounded and transformative. He's also the co founder of this incredible program, Sodsiach, which is an innovative eco-Torah discovery program. And he's led countless experiences that reconnect people with the land, the soul, the spirit, the body, the self, and each other. And this is actually how we met. And I have to say, the program is really, really special. In today's conversation, we dive into the Kabbalistic Sefirot as a map for transformation and healing in preparation for the upcoming Yoga Nidra series on the seven Sefirot. So, if you've ever felt drawn to mystical teachings but felt like they're too lofty, abstract, inaccessible, or over your head, and you wanted to experience them in a more embodied, accessible way, then this episode is for you. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Benji, welcome to the show.
Hello, hello. Great to be here.
Yeah, great to
Great
have
to
you
see
here.
everything.
Yeah. So, so let me just start a little bit by sharing how much your book has been so helpful for me in my transformation last year. And this year, I've been using your book to create this series for Sfirat HaOmer, this series of Yoga Nidra meditations. And your book has been it's just been such an instrumental resource. So I'm super excited to have you on and chat more about the Sfirot and how and this combination of yoga with Jewish spirituality, and also how we can harness the power of the Sfirot to really to facilitate transformational healing. Okay, so let me just start by asking, how did you get interested in the Sfirot? How did you get introduced to the Sfirot?
Yeah, great question. So I'm not going to get into my whole background story, but I grew up quite religious, yeshivish in the States, and there was a lot of talk about what God said to do, but very little talk about who is God or what is God. And that was always a real challenge or issue for me. It's like, well, before we can say, it's like anyone, you want to know who someone is that's saying something and telling you to do something. And there was very, very little talk, and at least in my experience or what was being taught to me as a teenager, not very much understanding of. who God is, what God is. So all of that really sent me on a journey. I left Judaism. I went as far as I could. I decided that Judaism was not a valid spiritual path for me. So I went to India. Got into Buddhism, meditation, Eastern philosophies, things like that, where there was a lot of talk about spirituality, certain pockets about God, of course. And long story short, I made my way to Israel, and I found myself in Eshet Torah, of all places, in the Old City. And there was a class by Rabbi Yom Tov Glazer. I need to give credit to him. And I'm sitting in this class, not very hopeful or, you know, but he started talking about the Sefirot. And I was like, what? And with the chart, and what is this? This is Jewish, and just talking about God. And so that was really the to discover the Sefirot, and to discover a map that the Kabbalists gave us to be able to understand, perceive, embody, mirror, all sorts of ways the divine in a very structured, thought out way, was really inspiring and life changing for me.
Mm.
So that's how I got into the Sefirot.
Awesome. What a great introduction. And so this podcast, people from all over the world listen to it, and many people might not know what the Sfirot even are. So can you explain a little bit? I know that you're really good with making these lofty, abstract concepts, bringing them down and explaining them in simple layperson terms. So, can we just like run through the Sfirot and also define what is a Sfira, anyways?
Yeah, okay, let's try it in 2 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
standing on
so
one foot.
yeah, so what are the Sefirot? So really, it's a template, a prism, to that the Kabbalists inherited, or they gave us, to understand all of reality. And it's a template that you can look at the divine, look at God, at Hashem through. So the Sefirot are within God, they're within reality, they're within nature, they're within our body, they're within our psyche. Um, they're within the physical world in many, many different ways. And it's really a prism or a template to start seeing, interacting with, experiencing, and ultimately channeling and harnessing uh, into reality. Let's do a Sefirot 101 overview.
Okay.
So we have to take the premise that God is infinite, right? God is infinite, and what that means is we live in a finite world. God is outside of this finite world, so even the definition of finite can't exist, doesn't exist with God. But more than that, God, for the finite realm to exist, the thing that is outside of it, or God, or the divine, has to be able to be all the things, right? So, in one or two sentences, right, that's the explanation of God being infinite. But there's a problem, because if God is infinite, and let's say that at the beginning of time there was only God, right? There was no this physical reality. Then, if God is infinite, there's only God. How is it possible for a finite physical world to exist? Because for that existence to exist, it means that you are you and I am I, and this computer screen, this table, that they're all different. But all of a sudden there's finitude,
Mhm.
finiteness. So the Kabbalists explain that the way that the world was able to be created is through the process of tzimtzum. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but let's keep it simple.
Yeah, let's keep
Tzimtzum.
it
And
101.
what Tzimtzum is, it's actually also the name of the boat of In the Life of Pi. Just fun
Oh,
fact.
cool. I didn't know
But
that.
yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know if people probably didn't learn Kabbalah, but the raft is kind of a good analogy of Tzimtzum in the big ocean.
Oh, that
So
makes sense
Tzimtzum is that
actually.
that Yeah. That when it arose in God's mind to create the world, God, so to speak, created a vacuum space
Mm-hmm.
within God's self,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a constriction. Tzimtzum, that some same is to constrict, and God, in this hollow space, it was almost, so to speak, devoid of God, right? So let's say God is this, just everything. Within God, somewhere there was this space. Problem is, how do you, if it's lacking divine, how does life flourish? Because all of life is connected to God and to the divine. So the Kabbalists explain that God created these vessels, and the vessels were the Sefirot, and there were 10 of them. And so there were these Sefirot within existence, and obviously not physical spheres, but similar word. And in order to uh, have life within these svirot, there's what Kabbalists explain as tzinorot. There were these divine pipelines of divine energy that pulsated into these spheres, into the svirot. The issue, or not really an issue, because they were designed, God created them to be this way, that you can imagine a glass container, and all of a sudden God's pouring divine energy into it, they're probably going to explode. And that's what happened. So not all 10, but the lower seven exploded and broke apart into millions and trillions and thousands of sparks,
Mm-hmm.
what the Kabbalists called holy sparks.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the missions that the Kabbalists explain we're here to do is that we're here to gather all of those sparks and to put them together, to recreate, to put the Sefirot back together, and through that to ultimately bring a revelation and manifestation of God into this world in a new way. So I hope that was concise and clear enough.
Yeah, that was a really clear explanation. Thank you. And let's run through the different sfirot, right? Because there's this, we can just go over maybe the seven lower sfirot that broke into all the sparks, and because every sphira, it is an emanation of a, I don't even know what you would call it, like a different flavor of the energy or a different channel of the energy. I don't know what you would call it, but can we go over the seven
Exactly.
sfirot and just like bullet point what each one signifies, what each one is about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll just say that the what you're referencing, the seven lower and the and also referenced in the top three, they're divided um, in what's called the divine consciousness, or
Mm-hmm.
consciousness in general, human
Yeah.
consciousness also, and then the lower ones, which are called midot, which literally means measured or measurable. And these are the more manifesting aspects, right? In divine consciousness or any consciousness, it's kind of hard to isolate or measure, right? How do you measure thoughts?
Right.
How do you measure wisdom? How do you measure understanding?
Right.
But these seven lower ones they're called midot. They're often translated as the emotive parts, which isn't really accurate enough. They're sometimes called personality traits, which also aren't completely accurate, but a little closer. So yeah, so let's just go through the lower seven. So the lower seven, they also divide into, on the right side of, if anyone's seen the tree of life diagram of the 10 spirit, the right side is the masculine energy, more masculine characteristics, and the left side is more feminine, and the center column is a combination of both. So we'll start on the masculine side, and obviously we're not talking about male female in the human sense. We're talking about specific types of energies.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is chesed, which is often translated as loving kindness, and this is the first impulse where thought becomes into action and behavior, and therefore it's the energy of flow, the energy of generosity, the energy of giving, of kindness, of unconditional love, of overflowing, of just really stepping into movement and action. So, and it has a very, very positive connotation, and it's usually translated as loving kindness. But we all know that if there's too much loving kindness, it can actually be smothering, right?
Mm-hmm.
So even though it is associated positively, there is everything needs to be in balance. So the balance side of that is the second one, which is gevura, which is usually translated as strength, and it's the energy behind discipline, behind boundaries, healthy boundaries, behind restraint, and all of those connected to a clear sense of self, an identity of self. Because when we start not having healthy, appropriate boundaries, we start losing ourselves when we don't have this discipline and restraint and all these things. So the Chesed and Gevurah balance each other. And then we go to the third, which is the middle column, combination of both of those, which is Tiferet. How am I doing, by the way? Should I go deeper
No, I think this is
or
perfect
am I
because if
going?
people want to learn more, they should just read your book. I mean, you go in a lot of detail in your book. So there's clearly so
Okay,
much to
great.
say about the Sefirot. So I think with just for our time purposes, you're doing really great with bullet pointing it.
Okay, good. Okay, great. So then we go to Tiferet, and Tiferet's in the middle, and Tiferet often is translated as beauty
Mhm.
or harmony. It's usually translated more as beauty, but it's really internal beauty. It sits in the heart space. Right, Chesed is the right hand, Gevurah is the left hand. As I mentioned, all the Sefirot map onto the body.
Mhm.
Then Tiferet is the heart space, the torso, and that's the energy to be able to properly channel Chesed or Gevurah in a balanced way, where neither part or way of being becomes extreme. And so therefore, Tiferet is the energy of balance, of connectedness, of harmony. It also provides context, because it's only real context that helps us stay balanced.
Mhm.
It's also the energy of healing, right? So
Mhm.
Tiferet is the energy of healing, and all healing comes through the heart space through Tiferet. Then we
Mhm.
go to Netzach, which is the right leg. And this is really now it's like all of those were more internal, and then we come through the legs even more manifest and external through
Mhm.
taking steps of action into the world. And Netzach is usually translated as victory, but it's obviously more complex than that. It is being able to take Chesed, Gvura, and Tiferet and masterfully channel that into the world in a way that you are victorious. And so part of that is stamina, endurance, over being able to overcome obstacles, right? And also be able to be masterful. The Netzach shares a root with Lam Natseach, which is a conductor,
Mhm.
and a conductor is kind of the personification of a master, of someone that's able to take many different things, put them together in a way to create something. So after we go from and Netzach is really a lot of masculine, powerful drive energy,
Mhm.
motivating to drive and do. The the balancing side of that on the feminine side is Hod,
Mhm.
which is usually translated as splendor, and it's beauty, but whereas Tiferet was an internal beauty, Hod is an external beauty, or more external, more manifest, more visible, and it's also the more mature form of Gevura, where if Gevura is restraint, almost just for restraint side, then Hod is a restraint that is more connected to the external world in a way that creates beauty.
Mhm.
And so the humility is involved in that. Being able to pause, being able to make space for other, being able to show gratitude, honor, respect, admiration. It's also the ability to slow down in the sense that if you're driving from point A to point B and you want to get there on the highway, maybe that's Netzach. Hod is I'm going to take the scenic route once in a while. I'm going to
Mhm.
pull over to at the and
Mhm.
and and those moments are what create. Then we get to Yesod, which is in the middle column
Mhm.
again, and Yesod is translated as foundation, whatever that
Mhm.
means. But it's the it's a more mature form of Tiferet, where if Tiferet is able to hold the complexities and contradictions of life, Yesod is able to the energy to take those contradictions and create a new reality from it. And so
Mhm.
Yesod is connected to the genitalia,
Mhm.
the place of creation, the place
Mhm.
of connection. It's the place where we really have intimacy.
Mhm.
Um, it's a place of our relationships.
Mhm.
It's a place of manifesting things into the world through making peace with contradicting components. And then we get to Malchut, which it kind of stands on its own, and it's all the way at the bottom. And Malchut is this interesting thing. There's many different facets of it, but basically, it has nothing of its own. The Kabbalists say it has nothing of its own, and what it is kind of the playing field itself. It's the space or the posture through which all things can be created. If the Sefirot are the colors, and Yesod is the paintbrush, then Malchut is the canvas, and it provides context. It gives everything its space because it has nothing of its own. It allows all of life and everything to occur. And those are the lower seven.
Thank you for explaining those so concisely and clearly at the same time. Um, so okay, so there's a few questions that I had for you, which is that one is that a lot of times in yoga, there's how there's like the chakra system and there's the seven chakras. But I've seen this happen like many times where people try to overlap somehow and reconcile the chakra system with the Sefirot system. But it's like in my mind, they're two different systems. Maybe there's a little bit of overlap. Like Tiferet is, maybe like the heart chakra, and then like you saw it, and but it's like every attempt I've seen, it's so not precise. It's like trying to overlap like a hexagon on top of a rectangle or something. And I'm curious, what are
Yeah.
your thoughts as you compare and contrast the chakra system versus the Sphera system? Is there common ground between them? How should we think about a reconciliation between them, or is that something that's they're so different and they're like two different languages that maybe a reconciliation between them is not even a goal? What are your
Right,
thoughts?
right.
I'm curious what your
I'm
thoughts
very
are.
glad you're. Yeah, I'm glad you're coming from where you are because I thought I would have to argue that. But I agree with you. There's a lot of people that try to map the two systems onto each other, and really exactly what you're saying. First of all, there are some similarities, but it's not a perfect fit. And the reason why it's not a perfect fit is there's two different systems based on two different religions, two different cultures, two different locations. Everything involved in a system of spirituality, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're very different. It's almost like trying to make peace or map the Western or Babylonian Western zodiac system with the Chinese system.
Mm-hmm.
It's like first of all, I don't know if anyone do that ever because like oh no, they're just two systems.
Yeah.
It's impossible. I mean, they're two different things. One of them is because they, first of all, their directional orientation is different,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the sky is different, and their needs are different, and their psyches back in the day in the beginning are different, which is why cultures, are what they are. And culturally is what I meant, and everything like that. So while there are the one thing I'll say is they aren't both mapping energies,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's kind of where the similarities stop. It's like, okay, they're trying to do the same thing, but there's totally different wisdoms about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I see this in there's so many yoga meditations that are oriented around the chakra system. And it's interesting because the chakras, they really are, they're not just these like made up abstract kind of concepts. They're actually, they correspond to the glands, to the main glands in the body. They correspond to nerve centers in the body. So there's an actual like physiological there's actual physiological markers for all the chakras. And and one of the reasons why I'm interested in Sefirot is because there's already so much on the chakras, but with the Sefirot, like they also map onto the body, and they're just, maybe correspond to different body parts than some of the chakras. But I really love this idea of taking yoga, and it's a trans-religious kind of practice, and we can make it our own. It can really be adapted to any culture. So if this is what speaks to us, then we already have these concepts, we already have these systems that we can incorporate into our practices. And I'm wondering if we can
Right.
talk a little bit about the Sefirot
Can,
and.
can I just ask one?
Mhm.
Can I just ask one question before we go? Because it's important to define our terms just so
Oh,
we're
yeah,
on the
sure.
same page.
Yeah.
How when you say yoga and that yoga is trans religious, I guess. When you use the term yoga, what do you mean by that?
Oh, that yoga is trans-religious. So this is what I've learned from my yoga teachers and also ones that are in India, that it's really not that yoga, because it's so broad. It's more than just the postures you do on a mat. It's more than just what the phrases that you chant. It's really about being present and being in alignment with your body, your breathing, your mind, and your soul. That can be that's universal. That is an overarching umbrella that can be adapted to any culture and any religion. So, for example, when we are chanting, let's say, pasuk from Tehillim, or when we're saying Tehillim, but we're saying it like with mindfulness, then we're practicing yoga. We're practicing mantra. If we're doing a uh, postures on the mat, we can, but we're saying, instead of like downward dog, we can say oh hell, or something like a tent. Then that's still, we can adapt it and make it our own.
Right.
There's so much space for creativity in yoga, and for just adapting it to a culture that speaks to the individual's neshama. And that's actually the main reason why I started this podcast to begin with, because I was doing so many, I was studying yoga, and yoga nidra was very helpful. And so I was listening to a lot of these yoga nidras, but they were all like, some of them would have like imagery and stuff that was just really foreign to me. And so I felt like, okay, this is an amazing practice. It works so well for the nervous system, but there was just no Jewish one. So I was like, we have to have a Jewish one that can speak for the Jewish neshama. So that was what the initial like seed that inspired this podcast. And that's what I mean, that yoga is trans religious. It's just like a really long-winded way of explaining that how yoga is trans religious and that it can be adapted to any culture across the world.
Got it. Okay. So just so I make sure I'm understanding. So what you're saying is when you're using the term yoga, you're talking about a really a form of meditation that has a lot of components. It could have obviously thought. It could
Mm-hmm.
have chanting words. It could have body movements connected
Mm-hmm.
to the body, and it's really you're borrowing the term from the culture that it came from, but we're talking about a set of meditative practices.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're borrowing the technique and the method from the originating culture, but then like the content, kind of like the colors and the flavors, we're making it our own. So I really just want to give credit where credit is due, and that yoga is a very profound and ancient spiritual tradition that comes from India. And what we're doing here, it's not about, replacing its roots, but rather it's about borrowing these powerful tools and techniques and layering in Jewish language, themes, and intentions. So we're coloring it with our own spiritual vocabulary, our own flavors, our own spices, putting our own twist to it while acknowledging the culture that it comes from.
Right, right. And of course, from a Jewish perspective, some of those original meditations and mantras and thoughts and even body postures might not be uh, agreeable, let's say, for certain people. Just wanted to
Mm-hmm.
make sure we're on the
Yeah,
same page
exactly. And that's why
and
the
state that.
meaning is so, well, yeah, and exactly, Benji. That's why like the meaning is so important. I think a lot of like I know like a lot of yoga teachers they don't use any Sanskrit words to describe anything. But the meaning matters. Some of the Sanskrit words, they're literally describing what the posture is. Like Trikonasana literally means like triangle posture. There's no avoda zara there. But some of the postures are
Right,
like the names of deities, and those are definitely, more problematic. But then we can make them our own, and we don't need to get tied up with the language. We can call them by our own terms, and still do the
right,
postures, just giving like with a different kavanah. So that was how
right,
I learned it.
100%. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
All right.
So we were talking about Sefirot in the body and how they're manifested in the body. And so I was wondering if there's any like physiological correspondence to the energy of the Sefirot in the body, or if it's more just like we experience it conceptually through our imagination.
Yeah. Um, what do you mean by physiological? On
Like,
what level of
yeah.
physiology are we talking about?
Meaning, like, okay, like with the chakras, for example, like they correspond to the main glands. So you can, like, there's like a matching system there. They correspond to major nerve endings. But with the sphirot, it's like, okay, right arm, right is like chesed, left arm is gevura. What is there any physiological reasons why these body parts were chosen to be representing the different sphirot? Like why is it like right arm and not like, I don't know, right ear or something?
Right, right. So there are the Ari also does add other components and there are more right there are the whole face. We can go deeper and deeper and deeper, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's spirit within spirit within spirit. So even within the head,
Uh-huh.
right, which maybe is one or two, there's the tenth spirit in it. Within the arm, there's tenth spirit.
Yeah.
So you could go all the way to every single meridian and pressure point, but and maybe there's someone out there that has done that, but they are connected physiologically, but also based on, as we were saying, a certain spiritual culture and inheritance,
Mm-hmm.
specifically of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, right? With a certain directional orientation and a certain, it's based on many, many things that are connected to the human body. So the just to rewind a little bit, right? So the first three, Chachma, Bina, and Dat, which are the consciousness parts,
Mm-hmm.
the Chachma is the first spark of inspiration is connected to the right hemisphere of the brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as we know more recently with neuroscience, the right hemisphere of the brain is kind of this, the more not the more creative,
Mm-hmm.
artistic, kind of like the inspiration hubs, all those sorts of things, and that's chesed. And then bina, which is on the feminine side, is the left part of the brain, which is more analytics. It's being able to take a thought and being able to stick with it and develop it and to compare and create a whole structure from an initial thought. So that's bina, and that's the left hemisphere of the brain. Then there's dat, which um, has a few. Depends on the system. Has it's the third eye. It's the cerebellum. It's the spinal cord, right? Which is dat is the point of intuition. It's the point
Mm-hmm.
of deep knowledge of knowing. It's the place where you don't have to think about something anymore. It's just an integrated uh, piece of knowledge. So, and that's connected to those parts. And then when we get to the body parts, it also has to do with um, a lot of other things that the sages have taught about what is the right hand and what is the left hand. What are you supposed to do with the right hand? What are you supposed to do with the left hand? There's many ritualistic and Jewish law components about certain things, the order that you're supposed to do it with, to all the way down to how one is supposed to shower and go to the bathroom and
Mm-hmm.
clean up after.
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
so all of that is all connected there. And also, when we take steps out into the world, right? So I think really the only big questions are maybe the right hand, left hand, right arm, right leg, left leg, right? It's like why those? The other ones are kind of pretty
Yeah.
self-explanatory,
Yeah.
right? Creativity is the genitalia,
Yeah.
you know. So and that's connected to a whole world of teachings and guidelines about the right and left, and also connected to masculine and feminine energies that we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about before. We're in this, some of our listeners might the Chinese system
Mm-hmm.
is different, and masculine and feminine are switched,
Right.
the right and left. So as I mentioned before, I think that that's connected to their directional orientation back in the day, where they faced that. I think it's south. That's like their map, like in ancient maps, right, from Israel or around the world in the West. The maps were not pointing. The top was not north until much
Mm-hmm.
recently. It was east.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I'm not mistaken, in the Orient way, in China, they were faced south. But look it up if you don't
Yeah,
quote me on it.
we'll take your word for it for now. That's really, yeah, that's so fascinating. Right, in in the Chinese medicine and even in the yogic system, they have like the Ida Pingala and the Sushumna nadis, which are like the right side energies, and then like the left side, the energies of the left side, and then they get integrated along this like central channel, the Sushumna nadi. And it's also really interesting too how in in the yogic system, the energies, they rise up from the base up through the crown of the head, and in the Sefirot the energies are channeled down from Keter, from crown, to Malchut. So that's also like when you're talking about that there could be like a different directional orientation. I'm wondering if this has any connection to it as well. But
Right,
yeah,
right. Well, we're going to the order of the spheroids. It depends. It depends what we're doing with them and what we're looking at, right? Like
yeah,
what we're trying to perceive. So if we're looking at it from God's point of view of channeling energy into the world, then we're going to go top down. But if we're looking at ourselves trying to reach the divine, then we'd go bottom up.
hmm,
And even the most common practice for Sefirot Omer is to go top down. But there are other ways in the past that people have done it bottom up, and even
interesting.
more specifically, in on the other side of the year, the other half of the year, in Tishrei, when we are kind of putting the world back together at the beginning of the year with the Sefirot. So the first 10 days of the year are connected to the Sefirot, the 10 days of repentance and all those things. So the most common map for that is down up.
Got it.
So it's more complex than one.
Yeah,
Both in all directions are there.
got it.
The other thing when we talk about the directional orientation of the sphere, as I said before, the ancient Israelite was orienting east, and the Beit Hamikdash, the temple's front doors were east, right? The temple
Hmm.
itself was oriented eastward. And so that's also why the Svirot, the right chesed, which is the right hand, is to the south, and that's important because the south, anyone that's into H. Shields models and more New Age hippie things about the directions, right? The south is the energy of doing and giving and
Hmm.
generosity. The sun is high in the sky. It's
Hmm.
day. It's you're going to go out and work and play and give and be generous. And
Hmm.
whereas the left side, which is around the left hand, is to the north, and the north is dark, right?
Hmm.
The sun don't shine in the north,
Hmm.
right? At least in the northern hemisphere.
Yeah,
That's why
right.
that's why all these components are
Right.
only in the northern hemisphere. So and that's the northern star, and the saffon, the word for north is saffon, which is also hidden
Hidden.
and vision, right? And there's a quiet in the north. There's restraint there, and there's a more feminine presence in the north. So that's also connected to those two sides.
Yeah. Wow, this is so fascinating. Okay, so let's kind of bring things a little more down to earth now, um, and chat a little bit about uh, how this firut can be used for healing. Because you're also a psychotherapist, and how can this firut be used for psychological healing in addition to spiritual growth? One of the things I have to say that I really appreciate about your book is how practical it is, because a lot of sources that talk about the sfirot, it's all like, abstract and kind of vague and, in the upper realms. But your book really
Yeah,
just brings it down with these very concrete explanations of how to take these conceptual sfirot and make them really practical, channel them into behavioral exercises or different experiential exercises to really embody the sfirot. So I'm curious to hear a
yeah.
little
Thank you.
bit more about how you recommend using Sfirot for psychological healing in addition to spiritual growth.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. Wow. Healing. What is healing? How do we heal?
Yeah, what does healing mean to you? Let's start there.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, there's a difference between healing and curing, or
Mm-hmm.
curing is getting rid of symptoms, right? Maybe like a more Western kind of paradigm. And healing is the rebalancing of the system, perhaps, or developing, who is a healthy person. It's not just that someone, it's someone that's living a balanced, harmonious, healthy life, right? So, and healing is the ongoing process of walking and living that life, right? Versus so that you don't have to be cured, right? So, and to do that, there's many different layers and levels of that, right? There's obviously the physical component, there's the emotional component, there's the mental, psychological component, there's the spiritual, metaphysical component of all that, which the Sefirot, as we're beginning to open up in our conversation, all those are there. Um, and I guess the most basic part of that is, right, you probably use with your clients, name it to tame it, right? If we're ever confused or overwhelmed specifically, it's usually because we aren't clear enough we haven't been able to put our finger on something, right? And when we are able to name something or name an emotion specifically, name it to tame it, it just magically, automatically, we have, like, I can name it. Okay. It's kind of like going back to the beginning of Bereshit in Genesis, where God says, to Adam, name all the animals.
Right.
And one of those things is, okay, I don't have to be afraid. Name it to tame it. Right? So just being having this language to start seeing these things within us is very helpful. It's similar to IFS, where our parts work, internal family system, Richard Schwartz. Just saying for our listeners
Yeah, thanks.
that you can kind of, in some ways, see the Sefirot as that, right? We have our over-giving, people-pleasing part. That's it, maybe.
Yeah.
If it's an extreme. We have our, overly judgmental, disciplined part, Gevura. If it's an extreme, we have our just like way too overwhelming and dominating and part of Netzach are too submissive and in Hod and all these things. So on one level, I don't know what level we're up to, but having words and names and ideas and constructs to the parts of our being to be able to talk about them, to notice them within us is the beginning of healing in a big way.
Yeah, that's I really like what you're saying there. And also because a lot of times in psychotherapy, there's a big focus on the thoughts, there's a focus on the emotions, there's a focus on the behaviors, but there's a lack of focus on the spirituality, on the neshama, and on the spiritual components of ourselves and our constitution. And so what I love what you're saying about the Sefirot is how we can actually give a language to the different dimensions of our experience. So yeah, like if somebody has a very, I don't know, rigid judgmental part or something, right? We could name that as a rigid judgmental part. We could give it a name. And then we can also give it that spiritual definition as well. Okay, this is overabundance of Gevura. And there's specific tools to
Right.
work on it, to kind of like, shift the needle the other way towards more balance. I also really love how the Sefirot gives you such a nice visual map of the body. And it really, like for me, it really resonates to be able to collate the emotions with the different behaviors associated with these different with the body parts, and then what's happening there on a spiritual level, also the spiritual energies. It just gives it more meaning.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And going back to all those layers, and really the core of the sphere are energies, right? And the body matter is really just one form of energy.
Yeah.
So and when the vibrations slow down enough to are slow enough to perceive with the human eye or all the senses, that's physicality, right? But when we go up. So this that same energy of that sphera is in a different form, divine energy. So yeah.
Yeah. So, somebody is working with the Sefirot for their healing. How would you know when you're on the right track? How would you know when, how would you know when, okay, like now my chesed is like not out of, is balanced with the Gevura. Right now, Tiferet is, doing really well. How would you know that?
How would you know that?
Yeah.
It takes the hidden 11th sphera, which is called Dat. But there's only 10. There's a few different. There's two systems basically. If you include Keter, which is the highest one, then you exclude Dat, and vice
Yeah.
versa, because the Kabbalist, the Sefer Yetzirah is very clear that, and it says there's 10, not 9. There's 10, not 11. Right? So there's only 10. So there's kind of like this hidden one, dot, and it's hidden because really dot is when we are kind of in our fullest self. I don't know if I can explain that right now in a nutshell, but it's not mindfulness. It's not. It's like,
Is it kind of like this
yeah,
deep knowing on all levels of your intelligence, like the cognitive, but also like the emotional and the somatic intelligence, when they're all you have
right,
this kind of deep knowing of what is the truth. I
yeah,
don't know if I'm
yeah, deep
explaining it
knowing, and
right.
yeah, yeah, no, that was good. And so we really, it's really, it's working with spirit is very similar, I think, to IFS, and that being similar to self,
Self
how,
energy.
how they use the word self. Yeah, and when we're in that, right, which is a lot of the beginning meditative practices in Judaism. It's kind of like where the mindfulness world, their destination is to be mindful. The Jewish meditative world, that's the beginning. Like, it's a given that you can be mindful, and then now we'll do the fun stuff,
Yeah.
right? So
Right. The mindfulness is the
we're
air.
not writing about.
Right. The mindfulness is like the airport. Like, then you get on the airplane.
Right, right,
Yes.
right, and that's why there's not so much written about it, because everyone obviously can do mind. We're just gonna write about the hard stuff to do. We're not gonna write how to chew your food, right? So when we're in that, kind of like how IFS explains it, that when you're in self, then that your extreme parts, when you're managing from self, your parts don't have to go into extreme roles. And so when we're in that, our sefirot don't get out of balance, and we don't have to be overcompensating one way or the other.
Got it.
And so how do you know? How do you know you need to have a real lot of self-awareness, and you need to know these energies to such an intimate degree that you have full control and mastery over it, that you're not giving too much chesed or too much gvur or too much, any of these things, but you're walking the middle path.
Yeah. I guess when you're talking about it, what it brings to mind for me is really learning how to listen to yourself and trust yourself in a very deep way, and to, getting acquainted with these energies, kind of like, it reminds me of like, okay, nature, right? If you don't know plants, then it's all just kind of like random stuff growing outside. But if we start learning about, what is this plant and what's that plant, we can recognize it anywhere in the world. There's a familiarity with it, and there's a relationship with it.
Right.
And I think as you were sharing, it brought up for me that maybe it's like the same thing with these energies, and just like the more time we spend getting to know something, the more that we can know it on an intuitive level.
Right, right. And at the same time, that's just like one of the the flavors of using the spirit in a healing way. But of course, I wrote a whole book on, you can map the spirit to be a very clear healing process to work through the spirit, not just, so working on specific things within each sfera, and that's what the whole, as you know, that's what the whole book is about.
Yep.
So there's many layers, and it's
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe this would be a good point to transition to sharing about some of your offerings. And like, I just really, really I recommended your book to a lot of people actually. And I want to recommend it
amazing.
very highly to the listeners. Like, if you want to have a transformational, a very structured day by day transformational experience with accountability and clarity. That's connected to the Sefirot, then this would be the number one book for you. Um, so let's hear a little bit about what your offerings are, what your services are. I know that you do a lot of things.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity to share my work.
Yes.
Yeah, so I like saying my day job is I'm a psychotherapist. Um, well, sometimes it's evenings as well, but and sometimes weekends. But that's the my main thing. So I specialize in trauma and addiction. I used to work with individuals, couples, families. Of course, I also work with anxiety and other things, behavioral issues, personality disorders, all the things. Um, and I see people all over the world. So that's the main thing. I also run a program called Sotziach that I started in response to the war, and it's a eco Torah discovery program. And you were on many of our you were a star student.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
most of everything.
Yeah, I
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say I really got so much out of that program. It like opened a whole nother world of Torah learning for me, and it's just such a unique experience to bridge Torah learning, not just in an academic way in the classroom, but also through the workshops and the experiential trips. You really like live it and learn it and embody it and integrate it in such a holistic way. It was like I've never experienced that before, and I'm really looking forward to the next round, whenever that will be.
Okay, amazing,
Yeah,
amazing, awesome. I'm so glad to hear that.
yeah.
Yeah, so we have workshop classes, text-based study, workshops, field trips, all connecting about Torah, Judaism, spirituality, and nature and the earth, and really showing how revealing the intrinsic connection, but not like on a fluffy, as you know, not on a fluffy, cute way, but like real. I don't know. Each class having 50 source sheets, you
And that
know.
was cut down
So
from like 100 source sheets. I just want to jump in and say like this is not like fluffy Torah at all. I actually used to like go to whenever I end up in a fluffy Torah class, I notice myself getting really like annoyed, and at the end being like, well, what did I really learn here? And I can't really. I heard some nice stories, but I can't really think of anything I learned. But from your classes, every time I walked away and I could just like review and list all of these new information that I've learned. And it was not fluffy at all. It was such a good combination of like the head and the heart. Definitely, enough academic, and like you said,
yeah,
very comprehensive source sheets, and but also like with heart and with creativity, and that's just something that's I haven't found that anywhere else besides your classes. So I just want to say a shout out to that. And if anybody is looking for a really wholesome, holistic Torah learning experience like Rav Benji, this is it.
wow, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Yeah, what else do I do? Very, very side, once upon a time in my early 20s, I thought I'd be a big rock star, but now I play little music here and there. And so I play music. If anyone comes to Israel and wants to, is having an event, I'm more than happy to provide music and music plus. Um, I've been getting into retreats more. I was just with Daniel Katz in the Elevation team in Mexico in February. We were running a very big event over there, and I was managing the support staff, group of 15 amazing therapists from around the world. And I'm starting to do more retreats here in Israel. So if anyone wants to come join a retreat or create a retreat or create a retreat for a group, I would love to do that. I also lead, you know, events and experiences for people coming and visiting Israel, doing interesting things. I have one coming up in a couple of weeks in the Old City in Nachlaot. And I'm working on my next book, thank God, which is going to be for Elul and Tishrei, the other half of the
Oh,
year,
nice.
the high holidays. And yeah, that one might even be better than this one. But I'm not sure. We'll see. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, wow, that sounds
And
very exciting.
I'm hoping, I'm still holding on to a little bit of hope that it'll be ready for this Elul, but I really I don't think so. Um, what else do I do? Anything else that I do that I forgot to mention?
Anything else you do that you
Um,
forgot? We went over the Torah, um, the psychology, the music, the writing, the workshops. I don't know, the yoga. I
yeah.
don't know.
I think
What else? What else?
oh yeah, no. You do weddings, so if anyone I do
Weddings.
weddings as well.
Okay.
So who wants to get married, elope to Israel, feel free to look me up. And then I also guide, people that are getting married before them getting married to start off their life with clarity and chatan classes as they call them, right?
Hmm.
Like preparing someone to get married, and that's all from halachic point of views, psychology, making sure that you've dealt with any of your trauma or baggage,
Hmm.
um, you know, marriage counseling, all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So I do that as well.
Yeah. So many things.
Okay, I think there might be some other.
Okay. This is not a comprehensive list. So if you wanna learn about more stuff that Benji does, you can reach out to him. So maybe this is a good juncture to say, like, where can people find you? And then, of course, we'll include all the info in the show notes as well.
Great. Yeah, people can find me on my website, Elson-psychotherapy. You can just search Benji Elson Psychotherapy. My email is over there. You can also my email, Benji at elsonpsychotherapy.com. You can reach out to me over there, and I will be happy to get back to you and speak.
Amazing. And of course, all of this info will also be found in the show notes. Um, I guess we can just start wrapping up for today. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you for this conversation and really, introducing the audience to the Kabbalistic Sefirot in such a clear and concise, but also comprehensive way at the same time. And I think this is a great introduction to our Sefirot series that's going to be coming out each week, starting in the middle of April. So every week we're going to be focusing on one of the seven lower Sefirot. And I hope that this conversation with Rav Benji, gives you some context and some meaning that can really deepen and enrich your practice. As we end off for today, was there any final words that you wanted to share with the listeners?
Hmm.
Let's say maybe if
Any
somebody
final
is like,
thoughts?
yeah, maybe if let's say somebody is like, this is their first time hearing about the Sefirot, they're like blown out of this world, and they might want to explore this further or don't know what to do with this or somewhere in the middle of their own healing journeys. What would you like to say is there anything you'd
Yeah,
like to say?
yeah. Well, I forgot to mention that I'm starting a course, my Dance Lumber course next week. So
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if this will be out in time, but but if any listeners want to go even deeper, I'm running a course. We're starting in the middle of Passover for 7 weeks, so people can join that. Um, the other thing I'll say for anyone who's listening that is like in the beginning of this journey or struggling with really any parts of spirituality or and specifically, my invested interest is Jewish spirituality. One of my teachers, one of his lines is, "If something doesn't make sense, it's you, not it."
Hmm.
Right? If it was considered important enough to write down at a time where it took a lot to write something down, you needed to kill a cow, you needed to go through the whole process of tanning and to make some parchment. If they thought it was important, it's probably important. Why it doesn't feel important to you is probably because you come from a different culture, a different reality, and just because something doesn't make sense doesn't mean that it doesn't make sense. It just means that it doesn't make sense to you. So there's always a lot more depth. There's always a lot more complexity. There's always a lot more information out there that can help put the pieces together. And sometimes it just takes finding the right people at the right time. And I encourage everyone to keep exploring. Don't yeah, the answers are out there. There's wisdom in the air all over. As the sages say, the air of Israel makes one strong. Sorry, makes one wise. I'm getting tired here. Makes one wise. And yeah, I just encourage everyone to go a little deeper if something doesn't make any sense.
That's a beautiful message to take away, and yeah, and just to be open to that curiosity. And you're right. If we don't understand something, that probably means we don't know it very well. Because once we start learning about it more, whether it's a person or a concept, then it starts making a lot more sense, and we can appreciate it a lot more. I'll just share real quick. When I was first seeing Yoga Nidra in different places, it just looked like pictures of somebody laying down doing nothing. And I was like, that looks so boring. Like, I'm not interested at all in trying this. And, and then lo and behold,
Right.
like I just had no idea what it was and was not very curious about it at the time in my life. But having been introduced and exposed to this world of Yoga Nidra and really like learning it in more depth, it just made me have such a deep appreciation for it. And same thing with the Sefirot. It went from these abstract, out of reach, lofty concepts that were completely unrelatable to, oh, actually, these are things that can be embodied and understood a little more and a little more. There's no end to how much deep you can go with this Sefirot. But I really like this takeaway of staying
Right.
open and curious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that you shared that because I've never you hear that often with like Jewish practice, and you think like yoga is like, oh, everyone's into yoga. It's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yeah.
but to hear that's really interesting. And it reminds me, that the truth that anything that's really important about life you can't understand until you start doing it. Can't understand marriage until you're married. You can't understand love until you're in love and lost it and loved again.
Mm-hmm.
You can't understand kids until you have some of your own.
That's right.
You know?
Yeah.
You can't- So if you don't understand, you usually have to start doing it, and then the real understanding that of the dot that we're talking about that's in your bones and flesh,
Mm-hmm.
comes only after.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
And thank you so much
thank
for
you
having
so
me. This
much.
was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much, Benji, for being on the show. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Rav Benji Elson and that it helped you feel more prepared for our upcoming 7 Sefirot Yoga Nidra series, which kicks off next week. If you're curious to go deeper, I highly, highly, highly recommend checking out Rav Benji's book and course, Dance of the Omer, which is a powerful guide for anyone interested in embodied Jewish transformation. And if you found meaning and value in this episode, then please do like, subscribe, share this episode with a friend or someone who'd appreciate it, and leave a comment or review, whether online or offline. I would love to hear what resonated for you. And if you're celebrating Pesach, Passover, then I wish you an uplifting, liberating, elevating holiday. And wherever you are in the world, I hope to meet you back here again next week for the first Yoga Nidra in the Sefirot series. Until then.